What is going on out there, world? It's your boy Tommy on the spot for Watch Along Wrestling. It is officially WWE Backlash season. And if you're new to the channel, you know that one of the things we do here is we like to take all of you on these wrestling trips that I go on here, the vlogging experience, inviting you all to watch along. But another piece of this channel and a big piece of this channel is nostalgia. And for me, one of the big pieces of that is reliving some of the experiences from WWE of yesteryear. And today we're going to take a trip back to 2007. This is actually the third time we're going to be going back to 2007. We actually had a video just last year on the channel where my buddy Steve and I gave an entire video looking back at SummerSlam 2007, which we both attended live, and everything that came with the summer of 07 in WWE. Certainly were not happy times. And then last month, I was joined by Randy Turco, who talked about his experience going to WrestleMania 23. And Randy was alongside my guest today, Alex Doriot from the Talking Taker podcast. Alex, how are you doing today?
I will say bonjour to you, Tommy, because I am the resident French correspondent here to the Watch Along Wrestling channel. And of course, we know Backlash is going to be in France this year here in 2024. And so I'm sure that's why you brought me on here, along with my travel experience that I get to share about from a previous Backlash 17 years ago in 2007. It all comes together.
It does. I love it. And yeah, I mean, it's crazy. You know, we were all together this for SummerSlam in Detroit, myself, Alex, Randy, and Nick, and we all traveled. And we were all talking about all the different WWE events and pay-per-views that we attended live. And for me, I love hearing about other people's stories just as much as I love hearing my own. That's why I make content like this, because I love to hear about the live experience that people have had through the years. And Randy threw out that he did WrestleMania 23, and he went there live, and I just about lost it. I was like, oh my gosh. Especially going to a WrestleMania live before 2014, I just think is so cool, because 2014, they made it like known that's what you should be doing. So I think anything before that, I always just, I love to hear those stories. And then it was almost on cue. You mentioned that you went to Backlash 2007 the very next month. So how did this come to be? And was this your first WWE pay-per-view?
This was not my first WWE pay-per-view. I was living the high life here at this point in my life as a fan, because this was my fourth WWE show I'd been to in less than a year, which was very unusual for me. I don't think I've ever done it since then, but for some reason, all the things came together. I lived in Augusta, Georgia at the time, and I was in college at the time. I would have been 20, 21 years old, and went to a Raw in Atlanta, obviously where this pay-per-view is, which is about, 2 hours away from Augusta. In September of 06, went to another Raw in Columbia, South Carolina, which is a little over an hour from Augusta. In October of 2006, I think it was the Raw Family Reunion show where they had a bunch of legends come on and all the different brands come on. And then infamously, December to Dismember, the ECW, the one and only WWE ECW pay-per-view, was in Augusta that we went to and have talked in length about on the Talking Taker podcast. So many ridiculous stories from that night. So that was not the first pay-per-view I went to. WrestleMania 20 would have been the first pay-per-view I went to. So those three shows, and then all of a sudden, Backlash is back in Atlanta in April of 07. WWE was like pretending they were WCW or something. They were just spending all this time in Georgia and South Carolina during this time, and we reaped the benefits of it.
That is awesome. And I feel like if you're going to go to a show, it's either got to be epically great, like WrestleMania 20, or epically awful, like December to Dismember. And to be at both of those, I feel like you'd get a good pop from either of and hearing that you were at either of those two shows. So that is very cool. And yeah, I highly recommend, if you've never heard Alex's show that he does with his buddy, his wrestling buddy, Travis White, highly recommend Talking Taker. One of my favorite episodes they ever did was talking about the WWE CW pay-per-view, December to Dismember, which they went to live. And Alex has a great story that he actually went to the December to Dismember. Was it the press conference?
Press conference. Well? Yeah. A couple days before that. Yep. Skipped class to go to that. Had to be there.
it's such a sign of the times, I guess, being able to be that age, have a group of wrestling friends, and whenever wrestling's in town, of course, you're going to plan to go see it no matter what. And not only that, but you're also going to plan to go to the press conference, gift school. I remember hearing they were going to do a McMahon Millions press conference in New York City, where they were going to have John Cena, Triple H, the person who won $1 million and the person who won $1 go up to New York City to do a press conference. And my buddies and I all skipped work and school, whatever we had planned, and like went out there early to go. And it's like, looking back, like that would never happen today. There's far too many responsibilities to go. I mean, I might still do it, but back then, like, it's like a no-brainer that those types of things are like, those are the things you remember. It's awesome.
It's such good memories. You're absolutely right. And you know what? It's funny that you say that. Those two shows will definitely stick out. We'll get a reaction from people when you tell people you went to WrestleMania 20 or December to Dismember. And this is not one of those shows. Backlash 07, I would argue, is a very, very forgotten about show. But to preview what we're going to talk about here, I would say it is an extremely underrated show, man. I had a blast revisiting this show this weekend. We'll get into it all.
Oh, absolutely. I kind of went back and even watched a couple of the shows leading up to this show. And it's just such a fun time, really, to be a fan, I think, of WWE. And one of the things for me, I don't know if were you a big John Cena fan? I don't think you were, like, around this time.
Definitely when, he got hot, and he was, that was, I had the original Word Life shirt, and I don't buy a ton of wrestling shirts, but I got that one. And, I was never a hater of Cena. I always appreciated what he was doing, what he brought to the table. Definitely felt like he got stale at times. And, I wasn't screaming, cheering for him, but I also wasn't booing him either. I knew he had his place and he was great at his job. But yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I think for me, at this point in 2007, I think the problem for me was he was feuding with Shawn Michaels. And I was just hoping that at some point Shawn was going to get another title run. Because he came back in 2002. A show was at Survivor Series 2002. Actually, I was at SummerSlam 2002 and Survivor Series 2002. Ooh, so like the entire comeback for Shawn Michaels was like, I loved it. Because they're both in New York. And it got to a point where he gets the title at Survivor Series 2002. And then drops it the very next month, and you're waiting for, at some point, you figure Shawn's going to get another run. And it just never happens. So for me, I think at that point, I really hated the idea that John Cena was constantly winning. So every pay-per-view was like, oh, this has got to be the one John's going to lose. This is it. He's done. No way is he going to beat. And then he'd win. And so in turn, I think I didn't have the appreciation for his matches because I ended that night upset that John Cena won the title and continued to win and retained the title. But now looking back, I really have developed a real appreciation for his run here in 2007. And I don't know if it's because he's become so silly, and there's like that transition from when he comes out and he's really kind of super serious when he does the big salute and then runs to the ring. And then he suddenly becomes like, hey, Stu, what's up? Hey, what's everybody doing? Like, he changes his entire act. But here in 2007, he's actually pretty cool.
And I think you had to respect, even if you might have been rolling your eyes or upset when he was coming down to the ring, by the time his matches were over, I mean, you were treated to a great match. Like, he always brought it. Especially this time period, maybe 05, 06, he's still a little, not quite fully formed into what he'd become. But man, 07 and 08, he was having great matches. You couldn't argue with him. You couldn't argue with the performances.
No, not at all. And also in 2007 here, John Cena, I think, is still toward the tail end of doing his online show, 5 Questions with the Champ. Do you remember this show?
Gosh, not until you just said that, but I do now. Yeah.
And I think for me that his little show that he did, it was about 10 minutes each week on WWE.com, doing 5 Questions with the Champ. He'd encourage people to write in, and he'd really interact with the audience. And I think it gave the audience at home, at least for me, I can say, it really kind of gave a bit of a connection. Like, he was our guy. You know, he'd answer the questions, and he'd also kind of briefly touch on whatever was going on. When he'd lose the title, he'd be tongue-in-cheek. He'd joke around with the Brooklyn Brawler. And it was like you kind of got a feel for who this guy really was outside of the big corporate machine WWE.
Dude, I watched that. I watched Santino's Casa. I watched Crime Time's show. I watched The Dirt Sheet. I watched all that stuff. But that is what I want on Peacock. You know, I please dig up the archives of those. Those are like completely lost media. And man, that just brings up some nostalgia I didn't even know I had by you bringing that up.
Yeah, I'll never forget. He one time, my favorite moment on 5 Questions with the Champ was somebody asked once if he had, I think ever, somehow it got to a conversation about him and his dad getting into a fight. And he said his dad like challenged him to step to him. And John stepped up to his father, cold clocked him, and in one shot knocked him out. And John said at that moment he felt horrible. And he immediately changed like his entire way of being. And
oh, wow.
Dad, like, and it really humanized him. And at that moment, he kind of, at this point, really had a much deeper connection with his dad. And his dad gets involved in 2007's WWE. Like, he dedicates his win at WrestleMania 23 to him, and eventually his dad would be all about the show.
Yeah.
As he got into his feud with Edge in 06, and then again here with Orton in 07. So,
yep.
yeah, you know, I think John Cena's run on top is one of these things everyone really now, I think, waxes poetic about it, even if at the time not everybody loved it.
Yeah, and you know, the kids who were cheering him during this time, you know, that they have grown up to look back in nostalgia at that time, and I feel like it's aged pretty well. So yeah, history has been kind to it.
Absolutely, yeah, no, for sure. At this particular show, so when you heard that Backlash 2007 was coming to Atlanta, it's the first time you're going to an event in Atlanta, pay-per-view in Atlanta, right? Because first December was in Augusta, and then you had WrestleMania in New York. So what were your thoughts hearing that pay-per-view would be coming to Atlanta?
Well, you know, I've tried to think back. I really don't remember like what our game plan was going to Backlash. I mean, I remember everything about the December to Dismember because it was coming to our hometown, to Augusta. And that was like, you know, we never got big shows like that in Augusta. But, you know, Atlanta got pay-per-views, but we hadn't been able to go to other ones that had been there for whatever reasons. Never worked out. So, I mean, I know we were excited about it. And we knew it was going to probably be some good matches because Backlash usually was a bunch of WrestleMania rematches. So, you know, it's probably going to be solid. And yeah, I think we were just, like I said, we would go to anything we could during this time period. So we were excited for it. I don't remember like the ticket buying experience that much or when it was announced or anything like that. I just remember being excited to go to it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. And, you know, for me, in thinking about Backlash in general, I think it was the hardest sell because my dad used to get every pay-per-view. No matter what it was, we'd get every pay-per-view. We'd watch every WWE pay-per-view, and he'd buy it. And he'd complain, leading up to it pretty much the whole time. Like, oh, $50. How much more are we going to have to do this? Do we really need to see this for $50? Yeah. But he'd always do it. Backlash was the one where he felt like he had a leg up because he'd be able to say, listen, we just saw half of these matches at WrestleMania. But to their credit in this one, I think they kind of changed it up a little bit for Backlash 07. You know, yes, you had Shawn Michaels and John Cena, who I think had a great match and a really good feud at this point. But by putting this together with Rated RKO in the main event, I think it added a different element and a really exciting match.
It was, yeah. They did enough to get you to buy it 3 weeks after WrestleMania, which is a tough sell. Tough sell 3 weeks after WrestleMania. They did just enough to get it over the hump there, I think.
Wow, yeah, 3 weeks. That, you know, it's so funny because like now it feels like way too soon for them to be doing a pay-per-view. Like they're still in that. I feel like everybody talks about WrestleMania still. Like it isn't even finished. And yet here we are now with the pay-per-view coming up. Yeah. 3 weeks though, like was totally the norm during this period of time. Like I remember end of 2006, WWE had that December to Dismember show you mentioned the week after Survivor Series. Yep. And then 2 weeks after that, Armageddon 06.
Yep.
Like that was just like you and I got all of them. Every last one of the favorites for $50 a pop, not even a second thought. We ordered all of them. So That's a great point. And some of the
But they must have been struggling with that though, because this one is the first. This is the show where they moved away from the branded pay-per-views. You know, they had separate brand pay-per-views since 2002, and I remember this one was the first time that they went back to besides the big shows, Mania and SummerSlam and everything. This was the first B show that they went back to everybody back on the same show, and I think probably there's a selling point, that's able to let them have a stronger card there because, maybe if you're just getting a SmackDown show 3 weeks after WrestleMania and they're having to dig up, I don't even know who would have been, on that SmackDown brand at that time, like the C-level people, to be honest, Sylvain Grenier or something like that. If he had to have a pay-per-view match or whoever, Chris Masters or whatever, maybe it wouldn't have been as easy of a selling point.
Yeah, I think that's why they pulled out all the stops. It's a great point. On this show, you're getting not only a fatal four-way, which was typical. I've gone back and I've watched, and I'm going to be doing a video on ranking all the Backlash main events. So I've gone back.
Okay.
I've been just inundated with a ton of Backlash. I don't know. I'm the only person probably who has done something like this because, like, who else really cares? But all these matches, they've done so many of their main events for Backlash are like triple threats, fatal four-ways, last man standing matches. This particular one, you're getting both a last man standing match and a fatal four-way. And on top of that, you're also getting a 1-on-3 handicap match for the ECW title on this same show. So they were pulling out all the stops. And I mean, this is really a sign of the times that post WrestleMania, because there's not too long after this where you'd get your WrestleMania main events and then poof, everybody was gone for like
that's a good point too.
The year. Here, you're getting all of the big stars are still pretty much all there, ready to go for the next event.
But it's only 6 matches, though. You're getting it's quantity over quality here, or excuse me, quality over quantity. You're not getting the quantity here, which I think is interesting. I think we were probably disappointed going up to it. Was like, wow, it's only 6 matches on the show, man. Like, feel like we're kind of, not getting our money's worth. But I do think the matches delivered, and I think that's the interesting thing about Backlash is it gets slept on, it gets overlooked a lot of times, but there are some hidden gems in the history of Backlash throughout the years.
Yeah, I'm also a more is more guy, not a less is more guy. For me, I want 8 or 9. I don't need like 18 matches like WrestleMania 35, but
yeah,
I like
or like an AEW show or something.
Exactly, like when somebody shows the card and it's like you literally need to like zoom in to see each match, but. I feel like now back then though, 6-7 matches felt like a little less than your usual 8 or 9 match show. But before we even get to Backlash, a couple of things to touch on in the lead up, even in between WrestleMania and Backlash. And I'll always remember this one because at the time, my buddy Steve and I were both working at Stop and Shop. I don't know if you Stop down south.
I mean, I'm not familiar with that. It's just like a 7-Eleven kind of deal.
It's kind of a wall down. It's like a big supermarket type of deal. So probably gotcha. Have Wegmans.
No, we don't have Wegmans either. No.
Wow. I wonder what you guys. What
we have Kroger. We have Publix.
Publix. There you go. It's exactly like. Yeah. So we both did, and it seemed like they kind of knew we were buddies, so they'd always stick one of us on the shift Monday night, and so the other one would watch Raw and text each other the results throughout. Yeah. So I remember watching this on April 15th, 2007, the WWE Live from Italy, where they had Umaga as the Intercontinental Champion defending the title against in an open challenge. And he obviously would call out a random fan. I remember texting Steve, Umaga open challenge, Intercontinental title. Calls random fan in the ring. Defending title against random fan. Random fan just won the Intercontinental title. And of course, that was Santino Marella.
Yep.
Who would go on to be? Do you remember this moment?
Oh, absolutely. I remember. We went nuts for it. We thought it was so creative, so different. You never see stuff like that. And I loved it. That's got to be one of the most memorable debuts of all time, I feel like.
Oh, for sure. And it's so funny because like they did such a good job in building this up like this. Obviously, it was a plant, and I remember who is this guy? Who is he? And of course he was famous for getting Jim Cornette. I'm pretty sure he's the reason Jim Cornette got fired.
Yeah.
Because it was like a backstage segment or something with him and the Boogeyman, and he laughed at the Boogeyman, and Jim Cornette slapped him in the face. And they had a decent HR department at the time who said you can't do that. So that was the end of Cornette. But yeah, it was just a crazy deal. And I think soon, though, you realize like he was not ready for the big time. And pretty soon he became, in my opinion, utterly boring, but switched to like incredible comedic heel pretty much overnight.
Yeah, I mean, they just had him as generic babyface, and that just didn't click. But yeah, once he got to be Santino and bring that comedy into it, just one of my favorite characters ever. Like, people say, comedy doesn't draw in wrestling. Well, it drew for me because, like, I was there for Santino for his entire run. Just so many laugh out loud moments for me.
Oh yeah, I don't know why I always remember him. Rather than the rapper or the artist Akon was in the crowd, and he kept calling him Acorn.
Yep.
Just thought it was like, I loved it. He was great. On that same European tour, Randy Orton would be sent home from that European tour for destroying. He got into a major fight with his hotel room and caused so much damage. Now there's conflicting reports. Either A, that he got sent home for destroying his hotel room, or in response to getting sent home, he destroyed his hotel room, that he was apparently like a total mess the whole weekend. And there was actually serious doubt as to whether or not he would make this event. So much so that on an episode of Raw, the advertised main event for Raw was Randy Orton going up against Edge. But it was on the same night where you had the famous John Cena versus Shawn Michaels match. So in order to make up for this, rather than canceling that match, they just had John Cena and Shawn Michaels go out there for 55 minutes and have probably, in my opinion, one of the best matches ever in Raw history. And in doing so, they just were able to say, hey, we ran out of time and move Randy Orton and Edge to the night after Backlash. But in doing so, do you remember any thoughts going into this that Orton wasn't going to make the show?
No, and at the time I probably would have been happy. Like, I wasn't a huge Randy Orton fan at the time, so it probably wouldn't have mattered to me. Shawn Michaels, Edge, and John Cena, that sounds great to see that triple threat. But I do remember that John Cena Shawn Michaels match. I mean, Travis and I, we watched that at his apartment, and we were just on the edge of our seats, and like we could not believe it. Every time they went to a commercial, it was like, what? This match is still going? Like, they never do this. Like, oh, there's still supposed to be another match. They're really going to go for an hour. Like, oh my God. It was so great. And it's so creative to do that, to have them come on with another match still announced. So it really was unpredictable. Like, you really didn't know when it was going to end and who was going to win. And I think the only thing that bugged us was just like, there's no way they're going to be able to live up to this when we go to Backlash in 6 days. We just saw one of the best matches ever. Why couldn't they done this at Backlash? But, they still did pretty good at Backlash, I'd say.
Absolutely. And for me, I remember thinking, because at the time, Raw also would go way over.
Sure.
You'd watch Raw and it would never end at 11. It would always end like 11:05, 11:07, once in a while 11:15. They like had carte blanche to just go as long as they'd like. And so I remember thinking on that night, I was like, they went way over. They're still going on. And at the time, like now every match has a commercial break. It wasn't really the case back then. And
That's right.
Very, very rarely would you get more than one. So getting 3 or 4 of them for one match was like, what is going on? And I remember thinking like, oh my God, and we still have Orton and Edge coming up too. Like, I thought for sure they were just going to go all night. And for me, I was just, thrilled about it.
Absolutely. Bring it on.
100%. And I think one of the greatest pieces of that match is that Shawn actually gets the win.
Yeah.
And I think that's what kind of crept for me, the idea that he's going to get the title at Backlash, like for sure. Like, they were testing to see how the crowd would respond to him getting the win. But I thought that match actually even made you more excited for what was to come at Backlash because of the fact that you really thought for a minute here that John Cena's title was in peril.
Yep. Very smart booking going into this.
Absolutely. Well, before we get into the show here, I guess in the lead up, anything you remember about your live experience that day?
So we had actually been camping that weekend with a youth group that we volunteered with, Travis and I, and we went with another buddy named Josh. We were the big 3 wrestling crew at that time. And so we had been camping all weekend. And I remember we drove back into town, and we actually had apartments kind of across the street from each other. And we drove to our apartments, took a shower, got right back in the car, and started driving to Atlanta. Just things you can do when you're 21 and like hadn't slept in 3 days, but let's just get back on the road and start heading toward Atlanta. And again, we always had fun in the car together. We had another buddy who lived or who was going to school at Georgia Tech at the time in Atlanta. So anytime we went to wrestling shows or concerts in Atlanta, we just kind of parked at his apartment, and it's about a 15-minute walk to the Phillips Arena, which is what it was called at the time. It's the State Farm Arena these days, where the Hawks play.
It's no longer Phillips Arena?
State Farm Arena now. Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So Phillips was, I guess, you're right. Phillips was like light bulbs, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
I thought that was the name of the arena. I didn't totally realize it had changed and it had gone. Is it the same building now?
Yeah, I mean, they've renovated the inside maybe 4 or 5 years ago, awesome. Fixed up a little bit, but yeah, basically the same arena. So yeah, we just met up with him, had some lunch with him, and then I think we waited at this chicken wing place that they're on campus, and ate like a pound of chicken wings each, which was not necessarily the best idea before you go sit at the wrestling show, but that was one of our traditions in Atlanta. And then, we walked to the show, and we're kind of, you don't ever see us on the camera or anything. We're sort of facing the entrance a little bit off towards the side. But we're in like the 100 level, lower bowl. So decent seats. I mean, like we liked them, but definitely don't see us popping up on the screen or anything like that.
That's awesome, though. That's good that you guys got to go there. And I was at that same arena, I'm pretty sure, because I went to the Royal Rumble. I'm guessing, was that
it's the same spot? Yeah,
same spot. Oh wow, okay, cool. So it used to be connected to the CNN Tower.
Yeah, no, it still is. Yeah,
I think the CNN Tower might be gone now.
Oh well, they have a place called CNN Center that's like a it's like a big food court, and they have I don't know if they even still shoot CNN stuff there anymore, but yeah, it's still connected to something like that.
Yeah, I think it's the coolest place to go, because you're in there and you can literally have your dinner, and then when you're done, like in this big mall type food court, you can just walk right to the arena. So I saw the Royal Rumble there, and then returned for WrestleMania 27, and that's where I guess they did Raw, and also where Shawn Michaels went in the Hall of Fame, I'm guessing, right?
Yep, that's the spot.
Great. And you guys went to WrestleMania 27 as well, right?
We went to Mania 27, went to the Hall of Fame. We didn't do the Raw that week, but yeah, Phillips is usually, or State Farm, that's usually where they have, the TV and the regular pay-per-views. I guess Georgia Dome, they only did that one time for WrestleMania.
Which is also gone, right?
That one is gone. They blew that one up.
Wow.
And built the Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Tough. But I did hear the new one's very nice. But
it is. It's extremely nice. Yeah.
I always nostalgic for it just because it's the place where I went to my first Mania. So
of course,
I love it. So as we get,
well, what about? So did you watch this show live? You said you talked about that with your dad. Like, did you convince him to watch this one live? Okay.
Yeah. So I remember he came by because this time too. He we're not living together. We're a little older now, but we'd always at least get together, watch all the pay-per-views. Really, until I started to attend all of them, that wasn't something that's what I did kind of later in my life. But at this point,
of course,
I'd go to a few of like the locally type shows, and at this point, I was really getting into Ring of Honor. So I'd go to a lot of the Ring of Honor shows. If they had Ring of Honor shows anywhere from New York to usually Maryland, I would try to get around and go to those shows. But WWE shows I wouldn't go to unless it was like pretty relatively local. And then that all changed. Probably changed in 2010 when we did an overnight. I don't know why, but we did a weekend trip to it wasn't Backlash. They got rid of Backlash in 2010. Extreme Rules 2010.
Yeah.
Headlined. I know Jack Swagger was in one of the main event matches because he was defending the title. He was on the shirt. It was terrible. And we went and spent an entire weekend in Baltimore, which actually was a great time to go to Baltimore, but it was like for the most random of random shows that we did for it. But no, Backlash '07, I definitely did watch live. I was very much, and I guess before we talk about Backlash, I guess I should give my usual exclaimer, so to speak, because Backlash is has a very big presence, obviously, by Vince McMahon. There's a ton of stuff going on with Vince McMahon right now, and certainly don't condone anything that he's being alleged of or anything to that extent. But it'd be tough to talk about this show without talking about Vince McMahon because he's on there. And then also the show has the presence of Chris Benoit as well. And I think for me, I had never really missed like a pay-per-view. I want to say until the Benoit stuff happened. While I definitely still went to SummerSlam, when I was looking back at some of the other shows, I don't remember too many of them from that period. And I think I had taken a little bit of a breather from ordering the pay-per-views all the time. Like it really was a black eye on the wrestling business in general. And I think when that whole thing went down, I kind of needed to take a bit of a step back. And it was at least a month or two before I started to kind of get back into it. But definitely watch this one live.
Okay. Yeah. So, just wanted to know where you were at this time too.
Yeah, especially because my dad, obviously a huge Undertaker fan, and also loved Batista. He thought Batista was just the coolest guy in the world. Like exactly the type of wrestler he'd be into. Big, jacked up, a guy like he subscribed to the Vince McMahon school of thought, right? It's either you've got to be a big jacked up guy or you've got to be huge or you've got to be super tall. Like for him, he loved the idea of the similar type of deal where you see these people in real life and they look like a superstar, they look like a superhero, and it was something that you normally wouldn't see all the time in real life. So that was something that, for him, seeing Undertaker and Batista at Mania tear the house down and have this epic match. Now they're coming back and they're adding a stipulation of last man standing. He was all about it. So we definitely got this one.
That's awesome. Yeah, I loved Batista too. And which is funny, like that's not the type of wrestler I liked during this time period. Obviously growing up, loved Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and such. But at this time, my favorite wrestler was Chris Benoit and Shawn Michaels. Like that's the kind of wrestling, like that's what I wanted to see. I want to see the technical 5-star matches. Yeah. But for some reason, man, I always loved Batista. Like something about his charisma and his style and his look, I was drawn to him too. Like he's got a promo leading up to this match with Undertaker tonight. It's the SmackDown after WrestleMania, and they show it in the video package. He just comes out, interrupts Undertaker's victory speech, and says, "Congratulations, I want my rematch." And that's it. That's all he says. And I was just like, I love that. Like, he's not like this 20-minute promo. He just says what he needs to say. He has his purpose when he comes out there and he does it. Like, he's just no nonsense. I was a Batista fan for sure. Just like your dad.
Yeah. For me, I liked him a lot when he was coming up, right? As the Muscle. And when he got that spot going up against Triple H, like that whole deal, I really liked him. And then I actually think he got a little lazy when he went over to SmackDown. And I feel like his matches on SmackDown were not as good. It might have also just been that it was SmackDown. I didn't really watch SmackDown, to be honest. So for a period of time, I hated Batista. I used to go to all the shows at the Nassau Coliseum. It was right like within walking distance of my college, Hofstra University, and we'd make the signs. And I went to like several shows with the big Batista sucks sign. And right in front, I remember we had like unbelievable seats for one of these shows, literally like on the floor. And he looked into the crowd, and I had this huge Batista sucks sign. And he looked over at me, and he then looked back at the crowd and like gave me a tech flip. And I was like, that's pretty cool. I was like, I can't even hate on it. That's pretty cool. And then WrestleMania 23 happened. I remember going to that totally not excited for Undertaker Batista at Mania 23 because I thought he was going to end the streak. I was very worried about that. So he obviously doesn't do it, but he also kicked ass in that match. And for me, I was like, all right, this is a guy who's taking this serious. He's clearly trying to get better every single time out. And so at the end of the day, I was just at that moment, it kind of changed me back onto Batista. And I was very much into his character at that point. And I grew kind of an appreciation for him toward the latter stages of his time in WWE. Even though he did put out a book, which I actually think is a great read. But in his book, he talks about how he had an affair with Melina.
Right.
while she was with John Morrison, and he says John was just the greatest guy. He didn't mind at all. And I was like, what? Like, how is that possible that he didn't mind at all? But I just thought,
Well,
oh wow.
what's John Morrison gonna say to Batista? Like,
And I guess that's part of it. Sure, is that piece of like him being able to do that piece, and exactly what is he going to do at that stage? Like double this. That's kind of like when Mark Mero said back in the day when he found out Sable was with someone else. He's like, "Oh, take me to the guy. I'm going to beat his ass." And then he finds out Sable's with Brock Lesnar, and he goes, "All right, I'm good."
he's just the nicest guy about it all. Wonder why.
He's Brock Lesnar. But yeah, no, it was. But yeah, so I had a love and hate. But at this point, I definitely thought I was especially after the first one, I was like, these guys are going to tear it up. This is going to be great.
Yeah, definitely a lot of anticipation for that one.
So before we get to the show, just a quick note: the theme song for this show is actually a song by Daughtry, former American Idol contestant. Were you an American Idol fan growing up?
Bro, I'm so glad you brought this up. I have this in my notes too, because it's not on the net. It's not on Peacock. No. It's not on the DVD. Yes, I was during this time. I watched every episode of American Idol. Oh. I had the Daughtry CD. I had seen, the year after this, I saw Daughtry open up for Bon Jovi in concert. I was a low key, under the radar Daughtry fan for sure.
Oh, me too, especially because, I loved American Idol, and very rarely would you get like a rock type of guy.
That's right.
Didn't happen all the time. You probably had like him and Konstantin Maroulis were like the two remember.
Wow. What a pull.
The guy Bo Bice. Did Bo
Bice? No, he lost to Carrie Underwood.
Oh, they made the right call on that.
I think so. Yeah. But I probably voted for old Bo back in the day.
I definitely voted for Bo. American Idol was incredible. And
like 4 or 5 years I watched like every episode and then kind of fell out of it. But like this time period, absolutely. I was watching every week.
Yeah, and Daughtry I thought he was awesome. And it's funny because a great YouTube channel that I'll plug is Defunctland. I don't know if you know Defunctland.
Yes.
And so they just did a little documentary on the American Idol experience at Disney World, and I can't recommend it enough. It got me.
I watched it
for American Idol. You watched it as well?
I went to that.
Did you?
I went to Disney World in like 2008. That's the last time I've ever been, and we went to that little experience there. Mm-hmm.
Did you enjoy it?
It was okay. It had air conditioning.
Yeah,
and it was hot as heck at Disney World, so it was fine to sit in there and take a little break for a little while.
That is awesome. Yeah, for me, what happened was I was watching this show again, and you got to the video package for the main event, and it's like this really awkward generic song, and then I was like, something's not right. This doesn't feel right. So I said, I got to figure out what the song is for Backlash. So I went and did research on the theme song, found out it was this song by Chris Daughtry. And the song by Daughtry sounds exactly like the song they made for the main event hype package there. It just without any lyrics and without any Daughtry.
It's funny on the DVD because I kind of went back and forth depending on when I could watch stuff. But I tried to watch the DVD when I could. I watched a little bit of the show on Peacock this week, but they're talking about Judgment Day the next month. And that show had a theme song by Ozzy Osbourne, who had an album come out around that time. And they have that on the DVD. Like there's, it's I Don't Want to Stop or something like that. So they're playing the clip of that here, but for whatever reason, they didn't have the rights to the Daughtry song, I guess. Kind of funny.
It is. That's really weird. Because I know there's some of the older ones too, where like when they used to use this band Trust Company, they had 1 or 2 songs, and like you definitely can still utilize they still have that on the actual like Peacock, and they have rights to that. And even if you go look at like Trust Company's YouTube page or Twitter, whatever it is, they're always constantly retweeting people talking about their songs from the pay-per-view. So I guess for them,
that's the highlight of their career right there.
Exactly. But I guess Daughtry was too expensive, and
I guess
they did I appreciate that they did a generic video package rather than just take the video package out.
Right. Yep. Because there's another thing on here that is clipped off of Peacock that I will talk about when we get to it. But there's a whole segment that was on the pay-per-view and is on the DVD, but is for some reason not on Peacock, and I don't have no idea why.
That is very interesting. I know that
But,
for me, so I was watching the build to Backlash 2004, which is the Chris Benoit, Shawn Michaels, Triple H rematch.
yeah.
And it's really choppy. So I was like, there's got to be something missing. So I went and got the DVD, and then I really regretted it because it's all this clip and footage of Benoit going back, seeing his old town,
his hometown,
city, and all of that. So it makes a lot of sense.
I remember that.
Why they would edit all of that off. But at the end of the day, it's it makes a lot of sense why they would take that off of Peacock because it's really awkward. But
made the right call.
Still do some pieces off Peacock for a show like this.
Yeah, we'll get to it when it comes up, but I could not figure out why it's clipped off there. It's really weird. But one thing that's not on the show is there was a dark match. Carlito defeated Johnny Nitro before the show.
Tyson Tomko did?
Carlito.
Oh, Carlito does.
Yeah.
Like Tomko in 2007?
Yeah.
Carlito and John Morrison should have been on the show. That's a good match.
I know. Yeah, that would have been a fine opener, and I really don't remember much about it. I have a picture of it. You know, I had my digital camera there that night, but yeah, I guess just to warm the crowd up because there wasn't I don't think there was heat or anything before the show or pre-show or anything. I think it was just a straight up dark match.
Yeah, that's really cool. And you were there for that? You made it on time?
Yeah, we definitely were there for that. Yeah, that's
very cool. That's awesome. Well, the first match, if we get into the actual show proper, the first match on the show was the Hardys taking on the team of Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch. Any memories you have of Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch?
Dude, I thought they were a super underrated tag team. I was a big fan of them. And during this period, I don't know if you really remember it, but it was like kind of low key under the radar. They were doing one of my favorite gimmicks ever, which is they were heels, but they were pretending like they were baby faces. They were just like shaking hands before the match, and they would like subtly cheat, but like act like act like they weren't under the radar. I always love when a team does that. They're not out and out like dirty heels, but they think they're the good guys, and then when it comes down to it, they do a little cheating there at the end, but they try to sweep it under the rug. So I always dug that, and man, shame that Lance Cade is no longer with us because he had a great look, great size, a lot of potential. I was a fan of his, even though he never really broke out beyond the tag team run.
100%. Yeah, I love these guys. I have like a real fondness for the tag team division from 2006 to 2008. I mean, so many great tag teams at this point. You had the Highlanders, you had Crime Time, like super over amongst my group.
So much.
We were doing the money, yeah, all the time. And then Cade and Murdoch, Paul London and Brian Kendrick. Even Deuce and
Eminem, Hardy Boys. Yeah, it's pretty strong tag division, actually.
Deep tag division, yeah. So, I was a big fan of these guys, and it's so old school. Like, you could totally have taken Cade and Murdoch and put them in the late 90s WWE tag team division there with the LOD and the Hart Foundation, and they would have fit right in. Like, they were really good in the ring. And they had a couple of runs, right? Because they seems like they
did
like earlier on, and then kind of came back and reunited here.
Yeah. Yep. I don't know. I guess I don't know what happened there. I think Cade went away for a little while. Maybe he failed a drug test or something. I want to say I could be talking out of turn, making that up, but I feel like that's what happened. But yeah. Yeah, and we love Trevor Murdoch just because, like, he's just like a good old boy. We're from Georgia, and he doesn't look like your average wrestler. Yeah. I never was a tobacco chewer, but our buddy Josh, who we went to the show with, he always had a dip in his mouth, and I'm sure he did during the show. So he was a big fan of Trevor Murdoch because Trevor Murdoch always had some chew in his mouth. So we loved that tag team, and we loved the Hardy. I mean, who didn't love the Hardy Boys at this time? The Hardy Boys were probably as good as they'd ever been as a tag team in 2006, 2007. Like they were watching this match, they were so crisp and so good in the ring. They weren't just doing high spots. I mean, this was just a straight up wrestling match. No ladders, no chairs, no tables, or nothing. This was just a really, really good wrestling match.
Yeah, I was a massive Hardy's fan at this point. I know Matt Hardy. I've said it a couple of times on the channel, but he was my favorite wrestler. I just thought the world of him. I thought he was always so underrated. Loved the version 1. I thought he had a great mind for the business. I felt like if he could have been Jeff Hardy, he'd have been the biggest star in the history of the business because he just has a great mind for it. He's able to reinvent himself so many different times. And I was really pumped about them here in 2007. And at the time, they had just started doing The Hardy Show, which was a reality show following them around kind of in their own life. It'd be like 20, 30-minute episodes on thehardyshow.com, which really started with him exposing Lita for cheating on him with like a cardboard cutout of Lita. He like recreated the scene of it. And they were doing these types of things. So you'd watch this and you'd see them doing the wrestling things. And then like they'd go on the early stages of like Twitter and be like, oh, hey, they vlog and put up a video of them at a Hooters, and then they dropped the number to the Hooters. So everyone would call the Hooters and try to talk with them because you knew they were there. So it was like a weird, looking back, of course, these guys were like completely screwed up on this show, like on so many different things. Like you didn't realize that at the time. Like I don't know how I didn't put 2 and 2 together that like they were developing a real problem with like substance abuse at this time as well. But yeah, they were so cool. Jeff Hardy had the cornrows at this time, the dreadlocks, and he looked great. And yeah, I thought this was a really solid opener.
Absolutely. Very fun match. Yeah, there's not much to say to it. You know, Hardy Boys win and retain the titles, which I was a little surprised. I thought maybe Cade and Murdoch were going to get the win here when I was watching it live. But I think they're going to have a match at the next month's show, too. So they extend the feud a little bit more. And yeah, it's just a great, fun opener.
I couldn't find clarity on this, but I know that John Cena and Shawn Michaels were Raw Tag Champs at WrestleMania.
That's right.
Did they lose the belts to Cade and Murdoch? It must have. Maybe the Hardys. I couldn't figure that piece of it out, unless they like disbanded the titles, which may have ended up happening.
No, yeah, I'm gonna look it up. We'll find out as we go on here.
Well, next up on the show, women's match. And I remember, at the time, I don't have the fond memories for the women's division. Certainly, like, you go back and watch any of the women's matches that are taking place since 2015, and I think they all still hold up. They're really good. But back in 2007, that is not normally what the women's division was known for. You had a lot of the pudding matches, the evening gown matches. Every single holiday special had them in kind of a scantily clad, a scantily helper, it's Halloween, boogie woogie, whatever it is.
And what a time to be alive.
Exactly. So when I saw Melina and Mickie James come down, I was like, is this going to be worth any? Should I even bother? But I figured for the sake of the show, I'd watch it. I honestly thought pretty solid match. It wasn't bad.
Yes. Hold on. I've got the tag team title history here. And looks like they lost them to the Hardy Boys. Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
No. Okay. Sorry. There was a tag team battle royal on Raw. So yeah, I guess Cena and Michaels were in it. They were in the tag team battle royal along with Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch, Val Venus and Viscera, Nitro and Miz, London and Kendrick, Tommy Dreamer and Sandman, Marcus Corvon and Kevin Thorne, Chavo and Gregory Helms, and Regal and Dave Taylor. So
if there's just throwing, crap at the wind there when it
throwing
comes
bodies in there.
Yeah, interesting. Well, there you go. But yeah, and it made sense too. I think them being the strange bedfellow tag team only had so long to go with that. So it made sense for them to lose the Raw tag. They had him at WrestleMania, which I remember we were talking about. He was the world champion and one half of the Raw tag team champions.
Exactly.
But yeah, Melina and Mickie James here, solid little match here. This wasn't bad.
All right. I'm glad you said that because I thought this was going to be my hot take of the whole show because when I went to watch this show, before I put the DVD in, I could not have told you what the women's match on this show was with a gun to my head. I could not have told you what it was. But after watching it, I think this is one of the best women's matches of the decade, of like 2000 and 2010. I give it 4 stars. It
Yeah.
was so great. It was so unexpected. Like, you could not ask for 2 better women's wrestlers in this time period than Melina and Mickie James. Like, this was the best possible women's match you could have in WWE during this time, because Trish had just retired. Right. So this is probably as good as you get. Lita's pretty much done. It was so good. So much fun. They do a great bit at the beginning where Melina fakes getting a contact stuck in her eye, and then, cheap shots Mickie James. I was like, that's such a great spot. Someone needs to do that. They both go down into the splits and start fighting at one point. I mean, the crowd was dead silent when this match started, and by the end, they're popping for the near falls. I mean, it was great.
100%. Yeah, no, it was so much fun, and it was great to kind of go back. And I think it really lets you know that if they wanted to at the time, WWE probably could have had a very solid women's division. If they gave them some matches 10, 15 minutes every single show, it could have been solid. But I also understand that at the time, they're really just getting rolling with the whole Divas contests, and I don't even know what it was called. It's something like the next Diva, whatever.
Diva Search.
$1,000 Diva Search, not $1,000. That'd be really rough. That'd be some rough folks in there compete for $1,000 contract. But yeah, the Diva Search, right? That's what gave us like the Bella Twins, Maurice, Christy Hemme won. I think one of them. Maria was in there, so they got a whole crop of women from that, which I think was a very popular deal for them. So I get it was a sign of the times, but really good match here for sure.
Well, I got to point out one of the fans in the crowd, not one of George's best, with this sign. It said, "I want sexy divas, not conceited Melina." And he said, well, he spelled conceited, CONCEDED, as if like you're conceding an election or something like that. And the camera zoomed in on this sign. Like, it got a whole shot on the screen. This was not just in the background. So I don't know what was happening there.
For sure, they did this probably in the back. They're probably like, look at the guy with the sign. Oh my God, look at the misspelling.
I hope so.
Zoom in on him. And they, that is too. But you'd hope somebody would say something at some point.
Nope.
That is something else. At the time, I was really big on the signs. I don't know if you ever brought signs with you to a wrestling show.
Yeah, a couple times. Yeah, for sure.
Around this time, every show I went to had a sign. And my buddy Matt and his wife Romina used to like spend the whole day making this like art masterpiece. And they were on the screen almost every time when they did that sign of the night thing. That signs, everybody signs. These guys were on there, and they had like the most famous one they did like a picture of Mario with the Italian color vest or overalls, and with the S on the hat, and it said, "It's a me, Santino," and they put that on the. And me, every single show was Tony Chimmel is my father. Every show, Tony Chimmel, and he'd see it and he'd acknowledge it. And like in the beginning, he'd laugh. This was literally like 4 or 5 shows, and then finally, like he gave me all right, bud, enough. And I was so disappointed that he got a side. But yeah, that was like
that's so lame. Come on, Tony.
I thought. Right, like who else is making a sign for you, Tony?
Exactly.
Like in the beginning, I'd be like, Tony Chimmel, look. And he'd be like, oh, love it. And then after a few, he was like, all right, man, it's enough, And I was like,
get over yourself, Tony.
Terrible. But yeah, really, good stuff here. And I love the sign. And so next up is the aforementioned Chris Benoit. And it's interesting because I think because he passed away in 2007, I forget that he was like still a part of it. Like he feels like such an afterthought on this show. And I don't even remember like much of the build to him and MVP at all, probably because it probably happened on SmackDown. But yeah, I mean, he's still very much part of the show. He's the U.S. champion.
Yeah, and he kind of was in that, upper mid-card role. You knew he probably wasn't ever going to get up to that level of champion again, but he was still very important as like sort of like a gatekeeper to that next level. And that was really the storyline here with MVP was like they were trying to elevate MVP and make you think he was legit. And he just couldn't quite beat Chris Benoit. He kept getting close and couldn't beat him. And I think they mentioned on commentary like he had just gotten a win over Benoit on SmackDown, like the first time he had ever beaten him. They'd had this whole series of matches, but it was non-title. So now they're having the rematch. And again, went into this one after MVP lost at Mania. I thought, well, he's definitely winning the title here. And shockingly, he doesn't. Again,
Right.
they have Benoit win.
I misremembered it. I for sure was expecting MVP to win the match, and when Benoit did, I was like, wow. It's also so interesting here that like he's presented as Atlanta's own Chris Benoit, and I'm like, wait a second, like what? Like I know he was currently residing. Remember they changed for some reason because he was from someplace in Canada. I don't know where. Right. And randomly they, I guess, got away from that because they felt people couldn't relate to somebody who wasn't from the U.S. So he was like, currently residing in Atlanta, Georgia, Chris Benoit.
You get it. Go ahead. Sorry.
Did anybody like you're from the area? Did people consider him like a Georgia guy?
No, he's Canadian for sure. Right. I mean, like we popped for it because like, yeah, we're from Georgia and he's like our favorite at this time. It's like, all right, cool. He's from Atlanta. Sure. We'll pretend. But like everybody knew he was from Canada. They did the same thing with Jericho for a while. They said he was from like Long Island or something. It wouldn't announce him from Canada anymore. It was so stupid. Just one of those weird Vince-isms. But we get a dark comedy moment, if you will, because on commentary at one point, JBL says, "Oh, you better call the Atlanta PD because these guys are about to steal the show." And it's just like this awkward pause when Chris Benoit's in the ring, and he says, "Better call the Atlanta PD." It's like, oh, JBL, if you only knew a couple months from now. But
it's like when I think it might have been at Mania or this show where at some point they're like, "Oh, that Chris Benoit has a bright future," and I'm like, it's
an awkward commentary for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely weird watching the Benoit stuff. I think he does lose the title eventually to MVP. I think they do 2 out of 3 falls at Judgment Day, and I think that's the end. And MVP, I think, beats him in 2 straight, right?
Yeah, I didn't remember that, but I was looking up the Wikipedia, and yeah, that was it. But I mean, these guys, it's a solid match again. You know, you can't complain about it.
It definitely looks like you can tell MVP probably respected Benoit a whole lot and is giving 1,000% of himself to trying his best to give the best technical match he possibly could out of that respect. Because all of his matches are not like the matches he's had with Benoit. But just seeing the 2 of them, he's a big piece of it for sure is that whole deal of him having that respect there.
Yeah, I said this on our Mania 23 episode, but I mean, this series of matches elevated MVP in my eyes as a fan because honestly, like, I thought it was a funny character. You know, I liked some of his promo work and everything, but I never cared about his matches ever. But this whole series of matches with Benoit, it really, I thought he rose to the occasion and really showed himself and grew as a performer. And from that point on, like, I was a fan of his, and I thought he turned into a really strong worker.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. And it's funny in looking back at like this, the 2 out of 3 falls match, which happens at the next month. At the time, there was a Ring of Honor was doing a variety of matches between the Briscoe brothers and Kevin Steen and his tag team partner. I think he passed away, El Generico.
Right.
They had a series of matches that ended up culminating in a 2 out of 3 falls match. And all the Briscoe fans were chanting because they kept saying we're going to beat you in 2 straight. And so they beat him the first fall, and then like the entire second fall is the crowd going 2 straight, 2 straight, and then they beat him in the second fall.
Oh, nice.
When MVP did it too, I thought that was kind of like an homage to the Briscoe brothers also going 2 straight and beating Benoit to get the title.
Very cool. I've never seen. I'm not super big on my Ring of Honor history. I just never watched it much during that time period, but that sounds fun.
Yeah, no, that was kind of probably, I'd say, like the peak of my Ring of Honor fandom was, you had Daniel Bryan, you had the very young Seth Rollins, Austin Aries, and like all of the guys who eventually Steen, and obviously Generico, he didn't pass away. He's Sami Zayn. It was everybody who like at some point made their way to WWE or AEW was in the Ring of Honor roster in 2007. So very cool. So this gets to the ECW. So at the time, were you a fan of the ECW brand?
I was, and I will say there was also a Cena and Orton promo right before this that had some very uncomfortable homophobic jokes that have not aged great either. But at the time, I thought it was hilarious, and it does lead to a great Ron Simmons appearance where we get his, his weekly appearance on the show. You had to work him in there at this point in time. Still getting worked into the shows in 2024. I mean, on the draft there, incredible.
Right, for both nights of the draft as well.
Incredible.
But yes, this promo is certainly a sign of the times where, homophobia is hilarious. And, they're getting to this whole deal where John Cena keeps doing the whole, I wonder in 2024, there's no way a promo like this airs.
No shot. No.
Yeah. But I had, what's great about going back and seeing these Ron Simmons moments is I don't see them coming. So when they eventually get to him, it's like, it's like a really cool, it pops me again to see him show up.
Exactly.
And I did. I think I had at the time the damn shirt, and it just said damn with a period. And that was that right up there with the Vince McMahon shirt that came with the DVD of just Vince McMahon's face. Were like my two random WWE shirts from 2007.
I thought you were going to say the Vince Loves Cox shirt.
No.
You didn't have that one?
I don't know that I got that one. Normally my mother would get me these shirts for Christmas. So, and normally there'd always be one or two that were like, why, what? Like, what were you thinking? Because probably there'd be something like in the on sale section that was just there for like $1 or $2. And she was like, easy extra gift. Boom. But I know like one year it was like a Batista poster. And like not a tongue-in-cheek Batista poster, like, hey, here's Batista, 3/4 naked. Here you go. Merry Christmas. And when my buddy came over, he was like, we've got to put it up, and did. Unrolled it, taped it right up on the wall, and Dave sat there for many years. But so it was. But yeah, I also was a fan of the ECW brand. I thought, I don't. For me, I watched ECW time and time again, kind of towards the end of ECW's original run. So I didn't have, I liked a lot of the characters. I thought they were cool, but like I didn't have this immense connection to ECW. So for me, I liked the idea of them having a third brand for like kind of the up and comers. I love the idea they were using it to elevate CM Punk, who I kind of knew from Ring of Honor. Shannon Moore, the Prince of Punk, was like a big standout in ECW. So I didn't mind the brand. I hated the use of Bobby Lashley in the brand. Yes. But I thought everyone else was pretty cool.
Well, it sounds like we felt kind of the exact same way because, I was a huge CM Punk fan. Loved seeing the new guys get elevated. It felt low. It was just an hour every week. It was really low stakes. Plus, you had like the ECW originals still really involved. It's cool to see Sabu, cool to see Sandman. Was a big RVD fan always. So it was a nice blend. They were starting to bring in a little bit more of like the WWE guys into there, so it was kind of it wasn't quite feeling the same as it was the first 6 months of it when you're getting like Rene Dupree and Test and Hardcore Holly in there having matches all the time. But it was still watched it every week, and this was if December to Dismember was the death of ECW, like the original ECW in a sense, this right here would probably be the burial of ECW right here. Vince McMahon winning the ECW championship. Just an unbelievable sentence.
Yeah, it is. It's the thing I like about this match, and I will say this about Lashley too. I'm not a Lashley guy during his first run, but over WrestleMania weekend, they had the WWE World, which is like Access, and they had an entire homage to the original ECW because it was in Philadelphia, and they had different artifacts from ECW. They had a chair from Balls Mahoney, Al Snow's head, a couple of different busts here and there. It was a really cool little deal. And then they filmed Bobby Lashley walking through it.
Yes, I saw that.
And he didn't take it at all tongue-in-cheek. He came across so genuine.
Yeah.
He came across like, oh, I love Balls. Balls was such a great guy. Like, I really grew a new respect for Bobby Lashley. I like felt bad that here I was killing the guy for his ECW run, but like clearly he took it serious and was excited about being a part of things.
Well, I don't feel bad because I still hated watching him during that time, but I do respect him a lot now. I think he's great now. I really enjoy watching him these days, which I never thought I would say in my entire life. And it was cool. It's fun to think of him. Oh yeah, ECW legend Bobby Lashley. And it's cool that he does have fond memories about that, in real life. But that still doesn't. I don't forgive him for clogging up my TV and making me watch these matches. But I will say, watching this, him and Umaga, when they were in the ring together during this match, it kind of slapped. They were like, it would have been interesting if they would just been able to have a match without all the, McMahon nonsense going on. I realize that that's the bigger draw and the bigger sports entertainment aspect, which is what this match is. It's sports entertainment, and it's a very entertaining ending to it. I would say very memorable ending. But I think it would have been interesting to see if him and Umaga could have just had a straight up match because they had chemistry together.
Yeah, they really did. And I thought the interaction, and I mean Shane McMahon is Teflon to me. He could do no wrong.
Right.
But the interaction between Shane McMahon and Umaga, I thought was awesome, especially like they tried to get Umaga to, like they clearly were trying to get Umaga to break, and he just didn't at all. Like he was 100% invested in his character, and just such a shame. Another one too, really young guy when he passed away. Would have been so cool to see him like involved with the bloodline and everything. Knowing that he played such a pivotal role for the Usos and Roman Reigns growing up as well. So I thought, he's just so solid in the ring. I'd never seen an Umaga match that I didn't enjoy. And, same deal here. But at the end, Umaga does all the damage. Shane McMahon about kills himself. And who comes in to get the win? But old Vinnie Mac himself, and wins the ECW title. And I will say, I couldn't help myself when he grabbed JBL's cowboy hat and randomly started doing like a shimmy with it. I thought it was awesome.
You got to give it to Do-Rag Vince and Shane. I mean, they gave it 110%. And they were trying to make Bobby Lashley look like a star. They were trying to make ECW seem important. Like we say, and this killed ECW and all that sort of stuff. But in a way, in Vince's brain, he thought he was doing the best possible thing to make ECW relevant. I mean, he's the chairman of the company and he's out there on the third branded show every single week, trying to pop a rating, trying to, make it seem important. Now, that is not what people wanted out of ECW. That's not what fans wanted out of ECW. But in Vince's brain, he wasn't trying to kill it. He was trying to make it as important as Raw or SmackDown by he thought him being there would give it that presence. So he was trying to do that there. And character-wise, him and Shane are giving it all they've got here. And it's certainly memorable, and it's very sports entertaining, if you will.
100%. Well said. And I mean, he's probably like, hey, who could we sacrifice on Raw or SmackDown and just have them be taken off the show, big star, and go to ECW every week? Me. It's like, at the end of the day, you're going to tune in to see the antics of when he's doing Do-Rag. And the next night on Raw, he starts off the show. He goes up to John Cena, and he's got the ECW belt on, and he goes, "What up, Holmes?" It's so ridiculous and so silly, and but it kind of worked in its own weird way, especially on this show, where like it was a nice counteract to the big serious matches that were coming up.
For sure. And this is where I'll point out the DVD. So for one thing, if you can tell here, no do-rag on Vince. It's actually bald-headed Vince on the DVD, which is interesting. But there's a segment that was on the pay-per-view and on the DVD that is not on Peacock right after this match, where Vince and Shane go backstage and they run into Sabu, RVD, Sandman, and Tommy Dreamer. And they all have their heads down and everything. And like Shane gets in RVD's face and he says, "You're looking at the new champion, Vince McMahon," and does the RVD fingers. And then Vince does Sabu's pose. Vince steals Sandman's beer and starts to drink it. And then like they just get in Tommy Dreamer's face at the end and make fun of him. And then they just walk off, and the ECW guys just all have their heads down and never say anything. And there's like nothing offensive in it. There's no music in it. And I just don't understand why they cut it out. It's very odd, but it is still on the DVD. So you got to get your physical media out there, folks.
Yeah. Jeez, I got to go see it. I probably have it somewhere. I got to go and watch it. That sounds like an incredible segment for sure.
It was funny. Yeah. I don't know why it got cut out.
That's very, very interesting. Very, very odd. But yeah, you know, WWE at the time, they had a lot of plans, I think, for Sabu. I think he definitely would have been big for them. Poor guy couldn't stay awake backstage.
Yeah.
But he, you know, I mean, he was in like pay-per-view matches with John Cena, with the Big Show. I think
Vince loved him apparently.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what kind of really had them take a bit of a backseat too was unfortunately RVD getting pulled over with weed.
100%.
Right after getting that ECW title, and the world title. He's WWE champ too at the time, right?
Yep, exactly.
All times. Like, what are you doing? It's like when Jack Swagger got like for some reason a massive push before WrestleMania 29 and got
a DUI. Yeah.
Like, how do you not keep yourself clean for that?
On, man.
It's crazy. Also on the show, I don't know if this happened here or if it happened elsewhere, but I think it might have been right in that segment with Randy Orton and John Cena where Randy Orton's walking backstage or somebody's walking backstage and Mr. Kennedy shows up with the Money in the Bank. Is that he like
that was after the opener? There's a promo with after the Divas match, there's a promo with Edge and Maria, and Kennedy interrupts Edge, and you know it's just kind of dangling the briefcase around.
Yeah. Still had high hopes for Kennedy. The next night on Raw, he announces that he shows up with the Ken Kennedy inspired briefcase and announces he's going to be cashing in at WrestleMania 24 in the main event. And they kept that going for just a little bit, and then unfortunately he got hurt again, and they were like, "We're done." And that was really the beginning of the end for the Ken Kennedy character in WWE.
Yeah, a lot of the plans changed very shortly after this pay-per-view due to some injuries.
Yeah. Really a shame looking back. I loved Kennedy. I don't know how we haven't at least gotten a Rumble appearance from him at some point.
I know. Yeah, at this time, I loved him. Going back when we watched all his stuff for Talking Taker, I did not think it aged all that great, and I wasn't a huge fan of his anymore. But at this time, I mean, he was over like Rover.
And his matches aren't that good either. Like, back then, they felt good, but they weren't really that. Like, they don't hold up well at all.
I don't think so. Yeah. So I'm kind of glad he's not in a match on this show that we had to talk about.
No, he's not. No, that's one of the good things about them being kind of the shortened matches.
Right.
Already, you know, we're ready for the Undertaker Batista last man standing match. What were your thoughts at the time about this match? You know, you weren't doing Talking Taker back in 2007. Were you a big Undertaker fan, or were you actually hoping Batista got the belt back here?
I don't know if I was like super invested on who was going to win, but I just remember that their WrestleMania match was so unexpectedly good. I was excited to get to see the rematch here because, you know, they brought it at Mania. I figured they were going to bring it here in a last man standing match. I always like last man standing matches. I think it's a fun format. And you knew there was going to be some brawling, some chairs and some tables and stuff. So I was hyped for it. And I do think they brought it. I think this was another absolute banger on this show. And maybe I'm biased because I was there in person, but I think it's a little bit better even than the WrestleMania match.
I agree. And it's one of these things I know a lot of people hate, like when they both get counted out. So it's a draw at the end. And the crowd starts chanting BS, right? They're not happy about it. And I kind of get it, but at the same time, I kind of like that about Last Man Standing.
Oh, yeah.
There shouldn't be a winner every time. Like, it should be that both guys are completely exhausted and have nothing left, and no one can answer the 10 count. Like, it actually kind of makes sense in a way.
Especially with the spot that they do here to lead to it, to make it this big dramatic thing. Yeah, I remember booing the finish at the time and being a little disappointed we didn't get a real finish. But in hindsight, it makes perfect sense. I think they were clearly building towards a trilogy at Judgment Day, but of course, Taker's going to get hurt before Judgment Day can take place. I think he may have already. I think commentary says like he's nursing a bicep injury
Mm,
going into the match. So I think he was technically already hurt, but was trying to get through it. But then, a couple weeks later is just like, it's going to have surgery on it. But yeah, clearly maybe they were going to do Hell in a Cell at Judgment Day. Possibly certainly they were going to have another rematch between these guys. So this is a great way to get to that without losing anything. And
yeah,
honestly, have Batista being the guy who gives Taker the spear off the stage, like it gives Batista a little bit of motivation. It's like, oh, like I had him. I did the move that knocked him out, but like if I had done it just a little bit differently, he could have won. So you give Batista a lot of purpose for giving him another rematch there.
well said. And also, I remember watching at the time. You're just expecting Undertaker's going to sit up, and that's how the match ends, right? He sits up and he wins the last man standing. And the fact that he didn't was kind of like, oh, damn, you got to take Batista serious here. He just out the Undertaker and got a big win here over him. So crazy stuff for sure. And really good. And it certainly, it stands the test of time. And so he gets injured. So they do the cage match?
Yes. He gets, they do a cage match with Mark Henry, I think it is. And Mark Henry beats, or maybe Mark Henry comes in afterward and beats him up, and that's where Edge runs in with the Money in the Bank
briefcase real quick after this.
Yeah, he drops the briefcase to Edge, and then the next night on the SmackDown tapings, Edge gets the title off Undertaker.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
Man, if he just wasn't injured, Kennedy would have got the belt probably, which is insane.
Yeah.
But he almost certainly would have been world champion. Like this guy was this close.
Yeah.
Living forever in the world of WWE on so many times, and just couldn't figure out a way to do it.
Real sliding doors moment there. It's kind of crazy, but this is a great match. I think people sleep on this match. It gets forgotten about because the WrestleMania match is so good, and because this pay-per-view is just kind of an afterthought. They don't do much to build to this match on TV after WrestleMania, but it's really fun. There's a moment where Undertaker leg drops Batista through a table, and from that moment on, like the whole crowd is on their feet. Like they are screaming. You see him on TV. You can hear him. It's just a great atmosphere and a really fun match.
Yeah, no, it really good stuff. And I think one of the other pieces that, in looking back at this particular thing, Batista not only does that their feud, it does eventually pick back up, and I think he does get a win. I want to say toward the end of 2007 against Undertaker.
Yeah, they do end up having a Hell in a Cell match eventually later on in the year, and then it all leads into gets into a feud with Edge after that. It all kind of like morphs into all that. So they do pick it back up.
Yeah, very cool. And then that brings us here to our main event, Fatal 4-Way, John Cena, Shawn Michaels, Edge, and Randy Orton. Do you remember going into this thinking anyone had a chance other than John Cena, or were you thinking John was going to win the match?
No, 100% John Cena. This is Super Cena all day. And I think they tried to make fans have a little bit of doubt by making it the Fatal 4-Way, but you just knew, you knew Cena was walking out with the title. But that tells you just what a great job they do during the match, because you get so into it and it is such a fun match. These guys put on such a great performance that despite the fact that you knew 99% chance Cena was going to win, you still really get into the match.
100%. Yeah, no, and it was really a great match. And the finish here is one for especially because I think it's odd that not only do you not get a finish with Undertaker, you don't get the blow up with Undertaker and Batista, but it's also weird to me that you didn't get one more match between Cena and Shawn, because it really sets up well where Cena wins the first one at Mania, Shawn wins the rematch in England, and then in this Fatal 4-Way, John Cena gets the win after I think it's something like Edge ends up spearing. Is it Edge spears Orton, and then it's Edge with the FU. Then he turns around, switching music to Cena onto Orton, but Shawn falls down. He can't get there to break up the pin enough. So Shawn's like losing his mind at the end. That like again, this guy has survived and kept the title. But at the same time, I was thinking this ends, and I was like, wow, they must have had one more match. They really never do.
Again, yeah, that was weird, but it's very similar finish to the Taker and Batista thing, where Shawn, he should have won. Like he's the one who knocked out Cena, but just the way he fell, just couldn't quite work. So yeah, all the more reason to have another rematch. But Cena goes on to face Khali at the next pay-per-view.
Yeah. It's so funny.
What were they thinking?
Our greatest 2007 is I went and watched the next night's Raw, and I'm thinking, who did he fight for the title next if it wasn't Shawn? And it was the Great. I completely blanked on Cena's program with the Great Khali.
Horrible. Yeah. So glad we were not there for that pay-per-view.
Oh, that would have been. It's like you wonder if anyone, when Cena retires, if anyone's gonna take the baton from your Talking Taker run and do a Talking Cena run. But there's so many things where it's like the 85 matches with Randy Orton, the programs with the Great Khali. It'd be a really tough one to do.
I thought you were going to say, is someone going to do a Great Khali podcast? I was like, maybe in India. I don't know.
But you know what? You would probably. I just listened to Jinder Mahal's. Somebody did an interview with Jinder Mahal, and I want to say maybe Chris Van Vliet did one with him, and he talked about how like WWE's popularity in India absolutely blew up and didn't stop. He's saying, yeah, people think what was the reason? It's not because of me. It was because Great Khali just like was such a big deal in India, especially during his run in WWE.
Hall of Famer, Great Khali.
He's even on Cameo, which I don't know how that works.
Gotta get a Khali cameo. Oh my gosh.
Maybe Travis' birthday or something like that.
Maybe so. Dude, this match, I've said it before, the gold standard for Fatal 4-Ways to me is still Final Four 1997, which I think you came on and we did an episode with you talking about that on Talking Taker back in the day. But I love that match because like it's just all action. There's no moments where two of the guys are sleeping outside the ring. It's just constant action. And this one, pretty close. Not a whole lot of sleeping going on. There's usually everybody's involved in it. And dude, like the last 2 to 3 minutes is just so well booked. It's just finisher. Like the way that they just make it into this dance is so intricate. And I give this match like 4.5 stars, dude. It's an excellent main event.
I think I actually, in watching this match, I prefer a Fatal 4-Way with no eliminations. I think sometimes the eliminations are cool, but like the next year at Backlash, they've run it back with a Fatal 4-Way main event, but they do it elimination style.
I don't remember that. Okay.
Triple H, I don't remember either, Tim. I wasn't doing about all the main events. I had no clue this match existed. And I definitely didn't order this particular event. It was Randy Orton, Triple H, John Cena, JBL. And within the first 10 minutes, Cena and JBL are gone. They're eliminated. So for the next 20, it's just a one-on-one match of Triple H and Randy Orton again. I'm like, they hoodwinked us. They got us here. Like,
why bother?
Yeah, it's like this is a much more entertaining to have everyone in there. And there's a couple times here where it's like somebody barely breaks up the cover at like the last second and really makes it much more compelling.
I agree. It was definitely the right decision to bring Edge and Orton into this.
Absolutely. So, any lasting thoughts? Anything you guys did after the show as you got on out of there?
Well, the one funny story that we still look back on is we were walking back to the car, and it's almost midnight, walking around downtown Atlanta, and none of us are from Atlanta. But we're walking around, and this guy pulls up to us, pulls the car next to us, and he rolls his window down. He's like, "Hey, you guys know how to get back to I-85 to the interstate?" And this was 2007, so no iPhones really. I guess you could have a GPS in the car, but most people probably didn't at this time. So he's just asking us, how to get back to the interstate from where we were. And our buddy Josh, he just like leans right into the guy's window. He's like, "Yeah, man, you're gonna take go straight through this light. You're gonna take a left turn on the next road. Go about another mile. You're gonna take another right, and that'll take you right there." And the guy's like, "All right, man, thanks, appreciate it." And he drives off, and we were like, "Was that really how you get back to the interstate?" And Josh was like, "I have no idea." Like that was awesome. That is just our buddy Josh's personality. He would just do anything to make us laugh, and just the most confident assertion to this guy without losing the beat. And that guy's still probably driving around downtown Atlanta to this day. No idea.
Probably came back to his spot, retraced his step, went left, went down for a mile, and probably still couldn't figure out where it is. That's incredible. But yeah, back then you used to have to, especially if you were going somewhere far. I remember you'd go to the hotel and you'd print out all the MapQuest directions and hope those would figure out the best way to do it, because you didn't have GPSs at all.
Yeah, that's probably what I did for this trip, even though it was like 2 turns basically, just to get on the interstate and go straight to Atlanta. But I still probably had to do that. But dude, this show rules. And I want to encourage everybody who's watching this or listening to this, if you got time, go back and watch Backlash 07, because to me, it's another one. It reminded me of Canadian Stampede in Your House from 1997, which is a show that just has 4 matches, but they're all like at least 3.5 stars. They're all excellent matches. This show, if you take out the McMahon match, which was entertaining, but still not a great wrestling match, I think the other 5 matches are all at least 3.5 stars. Like every match is good. It's slept on because there's not a huge build to it. It's just a Backlash show, but I think it deserves revisiting. People should go back and rewatch this. It's got a low-key great women's match. The 2 main events are awesome. The tag team match is awesome. Really, really fun, underrated show.
And I think one of the things I love about it is it just continues to build.
Mm-hmm.
There's great match here, and then it's right after that another great match that's even better, and it just builds, as opposed to what you'd see now, which is like if this show takes place today, Undertaker and Batista open the show without question.
Sure.
And then you'd have a couple other matches, then you do the Vince McMahon thing, and then you'd have probably Melina and Mickie James right before the main event. And I just don't think that you need to do it that way. I think that that's fine to have. It's great to have the first. Like for example, this year at WrestleMania, you had that great moment with Rollins and McIntyre, and McIntyre wins the title, and then Damian Priest comes and cashes in. And the people coming over for WrestleMania didn't even make it in time for that match.
Oh my gosh!
So because you're just thinking, it's just the first match. It's like these day and age, that first match is usually your second main event, which is very strange.
Yeah, there's this whole mindset now where it's like, if you're not going to be last, you want to go on first.
Yeah.
And I think there's some truth to that sometimes, but because you can get the crowd excited and they're going to remember, they're going to be hot, really, really hot for the first match. But I don't think that's always the case. Like I thought it was totally fine here to have these 2 world title matches back to back. And like you said, the show builds really, really well. So I do wish they would do more things like that.
Yeah, I think this might actually be the best back cover to cover, start to finish. 04 is very good. You have the Mankind. It's Mick Foley and Randy Orton, and then the main event. But
that's great.
Benoit's in the main event. It's kind of almost a weird watch now. But I'd say this very well might be the best start to finish Backlash of all time. It's really a great show.
Well, I'm excited to hear your thoughts on all the Backlash main events. Because I don't even remember a lot of them, so I'll be intrigued by this video.
I started every Backlash. I'd watch the opening video package, then I'd fast forward to the main event. And sometimes I'd be like, "What the hell?" Like, do you have any idea what the main event was to Backlash the year before this in 06?
06. Gosh, would it be Cena and Triple H rematch? I don't know.
You'd think, but it's actually a triple threat: Cena, Triple H, and Edge.
Okay, no, I could not have told you that for
Oh,
$1,000,000.
you don't remember, and I don't blame you. I didn't remember any of them from like '05. I knew it was Batista Triple H again. '06, '08, and '09. I had no clue what main events were going
No.
into any of those shows. Like '09 is a last man standing match between John Cena and Edge. Just
Sure.
bizarre. It doesn't even like all
It's
this
probably
stuff.
really good too.
Yeah, they were all very good matches. That's the thing. Most of the matches are pretty good, but also just very strange. So yeah, but this has been a lot of fun. I want to thank you so much for joining us here. Before we do get out of here, I know you and Travis are still doing your talk and taker and have now moved into more of a monthly format. What have you guys been up to over on Talk and Taker?
Yeah. So of course you can hit us up and listen to us on all your various social media, or if you listen to us on all your podcasting platforms, and check us out on YouTube as well. On our YouTube channel, you can follow us on social media and everything. Our episode that we just released for the month of May, we looked back 25 years ago to the pilot episode of SmackDown. And everybody remembers The Undertaker was in the main event of the first episode of Raw, but people don't always talk about he was in the main event of the first ever episode of SmackDown, which took place in April of 2000 or of April of 1999. Massive tag team match with Stone Cold and The Rock versus Undertaker and Triple H.
Wow.
So we watched that main event, and then we kind of compared and contrasted it with the WCW Thunder main event, which would have been airing at the exact same time. So the Thursday Night War, if you will. And that was DDP and Bam Bam Bigelow in a world title match on that night.
Yeah.
Pretty good match. They were both pretty good matches. And we had our buddies from the Bottom Line Wrestling Cast that joined us. Yeah. So that was a fun episode. And you can go back through the archives. We got episodes with Tommy on there, and lots of great content. We have our Backlash '07 episode. You can listen to even more in-depth thoughts and even more stories of our trip to that show if you want to go back in the archives and check that out.
I highly recommend you do, and also make sure you check out Talk and Taker on YouTube. Alex just put up some really fun unboxings of some rare Undertaker merch and does a really great job going through some of these random Undertaker memorabilia through the years that he gets through there from other members of the Pod Street crew. So very, very cool, and make sure you do check them out. And hopefully Alex will be able to reconnect here, especially I know both of us have a lot of SummerSlam memories, so we'll have to reconnect here real soon here on Watch Along Wrestling. Have you come back in real soon?
Yeah, and I gotta talk to you after we get off the air here, because I'm gonna be coming up your way next month. So we gotta see if maybe we can connect in person next month. We'll be coming up, so
awesome.
We'll talk some details here.
We'd love it, and we could certainly do an impromptu run-in during I love to do the impromptu run-in during a vlog. There's a famous one of my buddy Katema walking behind me at SummerSlam, and both of us, so surprised that we ran into each other on that one. So it's we'll definitely have to set up something. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, man. It's always a blast.
Absolutely, and make sure you keep it locked right here for more great Backlash content here on Watch Along Wrestling. Until next time, everybody, have a great good one, and we'll check out you all in the next video.